Hello, Element. We are wrapping up our Upset Alert series in another situation where the impossible happens because God gets involved. But first, I want to tell you a story. So my mom, growing up, I don't know where she got the volume that she got. I think it was maybe her German roots of hollering at cattle out in the field or something, like, small, small, I don't know why. She just had volume. She's not very big. I mean, she's like this tall, you know, but at the same time, she's louder than anybody I know. Seriously, louder than probably anybody I know. And the way that she would get us to come home, we lived in St. Laborie. We lived in a subdivision that was about a block, okay? And it was just one loop around that block. I could be playing anywhere on that block, and my mom could just yell, Morgan! And it would like echo in the trees, and like birds would fly away and stuff like that. And my buddies would look at me and go, what was that sound? And I would go, nothing. I think I have to go home. And I would run away. I'd be embarrassed. My mom's yelling at me from 800 yards away and everybody can hear it. Not only just my buddies, but every neighbor, every dog started barking. But she got her point across and I went home. It was embarrassing. But my mom also taught me a few things about being embarrassed of her. And this is what I mean. She told me that if I was ever in a situation that I didn't want to be in, if I was around people that I didn't want to be with, or I was in a situation where people were asking me to do things that I didn't want to do and I needed to get out, that I could blame her. She said, you could just tell people I'm the worst mom on the planet. I'm the meanest mom on the planet. I'm awful. I'm going to take away all your video games. I'm going to take away all your CDs. I'm going to take away your stereo. I'm going to take away it all if you're not home at 6 p.m. And you can tell them and you can make up a story about how awful I am, and then you just blame it on me and then come home. She was willing to let me embarrass her so that I could be loved. Very interesting dynamic there. She would embarrass the heck out of me some days, but then she would love me so well that she didn't care if she was embarrassed. I love my mom for that. I love the way that she taught me that I can always depend on her and always count on her. Today's story of the impossible really has to do with someone being embarrassed in front of the other people because of their faith. There was a synagogue leader, his name was Jairus, and he was probably at the meetings. Scott pointed out on Sunday, he was probably at the meetings where they were deciding what they were going to do about Jesus and if they were going to kill him, like all the religious leaders of the time. He was probably in that meeting. He was one of the leaders of that whole club, right? And so when Jesus comes to town, the last person on the planet he wants to be seen with is Jesus, but something happens. His daughter, at about 12, starts to die. She's so sick. And the only option that Jairus has is this guy who is in meetings and in the I Hate Jesus club is now coming to Jesus in front of people, coming and bowing at his feet, weeping at his feet and saying, I don't know where else to go. I don't know who else can raise the dead. I don't know who else can help a little girl, my daughter, who's so sick she's beyond repair. I've heard that you can. And think of how embarrassed he must have been there. But what it was worth being embarrassed for, it was his daughter. It was the life of his kid. It was the life of his family. It was the hope of a future for his daughter. It was worth being embarrassed for. And along the way, a woman who had been sick and hurting for a long time interrupted Jesus, and Jesus stopped to say, essentially going, you have a daughter who's sick. I have all these daughters who are sick. I have all these sons who are sick. And so he heals this woman of her illness, of the way that she was hurting. And everyone was amazed. But because he stopped to help this woman, Jairus' daughter died because the time had gone by and she had passed away. And Jesus said, don't worry. Don't worry about her. She will be healed. And so he's following Jairus home, and there's people outside weeping and making a really big deal of his daughter dying. And the news is cemented at that point that she is in fact dead. And Jesus looks at the crowd and says, don't worry about her. She's just sleeping. And everyone goes from weeping and crying to laughing at him, being embarrassed of him, saying, you're a joke. How could you say that she's still alive? How are you going to wake her up? Are you kidding me? They thought he was a joke. They were embarrassed of Jesus. They were embarrassed that someone would even think that. And Jesus and just a few disciples walked into the room. It says, my daughter, get up. And she gets up, and her spirit, scripture says her spirit returned to her. And she was made well. She was healed. So there's a lot going on in this story. One, Jairus, so embarrassing to go to the person who you're making fun of, the person who you and your club of friends hate, the ones you're texting about, the ones that you're trying to figure out how to gossip about, the ones you're trying to figure out how to destroy. And he has to go to that person for help. But it was worth being embarrassed for. His daughter's life was on the line. And then you think about the people who thought they knew everything, who were crying about this dead little girl. And that's all they had known at that point. But when Jesus said that something impossible could happen, they started laughing at him. They were embarrassed of him. They were embarrassed to hear that he thought that he could do something about it. There's a scripture when I first started following Jesus that always stuck in my mind. And it was in Luke chapter 9. And in the Message version it says, "If any of you is embarrassed with me in the way that I'm leading you, know that the Son of Man will be far more embarrassed with you when he arrives in all his splendor in the company with the Father and the holy angels." Saying, you want to be embarrassed of me? I'll be embarrassed of you because of that. It's interesting. It's like when we tell Jesus to leave, he'll leave. When we say we're embarrassed of Jesus, he'll go, well, I'm embarrassed of you then. So like, imagine it like this. Imagine you've just been treating your parents like trash. You've been back talking. You've not been following the rules at home. You haven't helped around the house at all. You were supposed to do a few things. You didn't. You've been lying. You've been going behind their back, whatever it is. But they're always there for you, right? And you act embarrassed of them. You act angry at them, whatever it is. And then one day they finally go, you know what? I'm embarrassed of you. I'm done with you. If you're done with me, I'm done with you. What do you do then? What do you do then when you need them to sign off on that paperwork? What do you do then when you need money because you need to feed your own self? What do you do then that you can't put gas in your gas tank anymore? What do you do then? If you're embarrassed of me, I'll be embarrassed of you. I'll treat you like you want to treat me. That's what Jesus is saying. And when I was starting to follow Jesus, I was thinking there's going to be moments in my life where I'm going to choose Jesus, or I'm going to choose things that I stand up for in my faith, or I'm going to choose to not be in certain situations, and it's going to be embarrassing. But Jesus is saying, if you're embarrassed of me in those moments, I'm embarrassed of you. What's worth being embarrassed for in your faith? Is it someone dying? Is it a friend making a poor life decision that you know is going to impact them forever? Is it you admitting that you lied? Is it you admitting that you've been cheating? Is it you admitting that you've been doing things behind other people's backs? What's worth being embarrassed for so that your faith can move in action? What would you do with your faith if you weren't embarrassed anymore? I know there's stuff in your life that you shouldn't be doing that you know you're doing. I've already talked about those. But maybe there's some things that you aren't doing that you know you should be doing. Like stepping forward and praying in your group. Maybe it's you leading your friend to church and saying, hey, come to Element with me. Come to camp with me this summer. Maybe it's you deciding to be baptized. You're following, you put your faith in Jesus. You believe he is who he says he is. But now it's time to move in action. It's time to decide what's worth being embarrassed for. Jesus calls us to believe and be baptized and to follow him. Are you too embarrassed to be baptized? Are you too embarrassed to move forward in that relationship with Jesus? The Sunday after Easter, we're having a baptism Sunday, and maybe it's your time. Maybe it's your opportunity. Maybe you and a friend or you and a family member have been talking about this for years, and it's finally time to do it. Jesus says, if you're embarrassed of me, I'll be embarrassed of you. But just like my mom, when she said, you can throw me under the rug. You can hurt me. You can put the pain of whatever situation you're in on me. I will bear that for you, and you can be free. That's the gospel. That's Jesus saying, if you want me to take on the sins of your life, if you want me to go to the cross that you deserve, if you want me to take on that pain so that you can go free, I won't be embarrassed of you in that moment. And I will take on all the embarrassment that you've ever had. And I will be stripped naked and put onto a cross, nailed to a cross, bleed out and suffocate in front of people. I'll be embarrassed for you because I'm not embarrassed of you. Do you see the love in that moment? What's worth being embarrassed for in your life? I want you to talk about that in your small groups.